Here are some books you can read in a day. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. Welcome back to my channel. Here we talk about books and writing, and today I thought it might be fun to go over some books that you can read in a day. Before we get started, as always, in the description there will be a link for my newsletter and my newest release, Finding His Mate, which is a spicy paranormal romance novella. Now, there is so much going on in my neighborhood right now. I've got like 7 kids in my yard who are not my own. There's construction. There's a lot. It's also 95 degrees out, so my hair's wet. I couldn't blow dry. I'm so sorry. But one of my favorite ways to spend a day like this in the summer is to read an entire book, start to finish in one day. I love doing that so much in the summer in particular. I mean, I do it all year, but like something about doing it in the summer just is perfect. So I got together a big stack that are sitting on my lap right now of books that I've read in a day, or I didn't read in quite a day, but I wish I could have, to recommend to you. So let's just go ahead and get started. We're going to start with Witches by Brenda Lozano, which I really wanted to read in a day, but my children just would not leave me alone. So I read almost all of it in one day and then finished it the next day. And this is a magical realism-ish tale about a woman named Zoe who is interviewing a woman named Feliciana, but Feliciana is mostly talking about her cousin Paloma. It has 2 narrators, Zoe, who's a little bit more of a straightforward narrator, and you get to see her past, her childhood, her teens, her young adulthood, living in Mexico City, and then Feliciana, who is like a stream of conscious narrator. So that's like super jumbled, but like really good writing to get through. This is something that you could definitely read in one day. And my favorite part of this book was the scene description, like the setting description of Mexico City, because it was just so good. It made me wish I was there. This book is 217 pages, so not too long, very quick. You can read it in a day. Next, I have Blackbird House by Alice Hoffman, which I did read in a day last May. So not technically in the summer, but I read it outside and it was perfect. This is another magical realism one. This is the story of a piece of land for 200 years. So every chapter follows people who live on this land in New England, and you get to know the family who lives there. And Alice Hoffman does such a good job that literally you are in love and heartbroken and feeling so many emotions for these people that you've gotten to know in like 20 pages. So I'd say this is almost like a collection of short stories, but I really recommend reading this all in one day because I think the impact of it is heavier when you do read it all in one go. Another book I actually did read in one day was Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaghy. This one is a little on the long side for a book in a day. It's 256 pages. But I couldn't put it down, which is part of the reason I read it in one day. This is the story of Inti and Aggie, who are identical twins, and they've just come to Scotland because Inti is, she's like a wildlife biologist, and she's reintroducing wolves into the Scottish Highlands. There's a lot of pushback from the locals, who are mostly farmers. This book follows that plot line, but it also follows when they are children living in rural Alaska with their father, basically like roughing it in the woods, living almost like pioneer lifestyle. And then it also goes from Alaska, when they're in Alaska, which is where they've just come from when something really bad happened to them. I love this book so much. This book has a ton of content warnings, so do read them before you pick them up. But this is one of my favorite books of all time, I think. I think I've read it long enough ago that I can call it that. Next, we have a book I just read. It's No Two Persons by Erica Bauermeister. And this is one that I didn't read in one day, but I totally wish I had because I didn't start it until I think 6 p.m. one day. But if this had been a morning start, I would have done it. It's a cool book because the first chapter is about a young woman trying to write a book. And then she writes the book. And the rest of the chapters are all about different people who read that book and how it affects them. And honestly, not every chapter is amazing, but some of them are so fantastic that I just fell in love with the story. Again, this is another one of those authors who takes 20 pages and makes you just fall in love with someone and your heart breaks with them. The second to last story in here was my favorite. Cried like a baby. My next recommendation, you can really read this in an hour. You don't need a day, but it's Galatea by Madeline Miller. It's really short. It's like a legit short story, not even a novella. It is 50 pages, and I mean, there's only this much text on each page. It's a legit short story. Okay, so here's the good thing about Galatea. If you love Song of Achilles and Circe because of the characterization and the plot and the amazing writing, you'll really like this. Now, it's not going to have the emotional impact that either A Song of Achilles or Circe has on someone because it's just not as long, but I think she did a really good job in a short story at making you feel so many emotions. Galatea is the woman who was made of stone and then like came to life, and her sculptor married her and had children with her. And it's from her point of view. And the end is perfection. I had to put some romance on here, and romance is interesting because I think there's a lot of romance novels you can read in a day, because I think a lot of romance novels are plotted in a way that like you can't put them down, especially if they're like either a historical adventure or a romantic suspense. So I just specifically chose this series to highlight, but honestly, there are so many different romance novels you could read in a day. The series I chose is the Highland Magic series by Kerrigan Byrne, and that is because this is a book you can read in a night. So it's a 9-book series, but it's technically like 3 trilogies, and I read all of these like 8:30 at night, started it, finished it before I went to bed at like 10:30 or 11. They're very quick novellas. They have berserkers, witches, druids, banshees, kings, lots of magic, lots of fun. They're very spicy, as Kerrigan Byrne is, and I think that they're just a good, if you want a romance before bed, or you know you're going to be on a plane for an hour and a half or 2 hours, definitely try one of these. Oh, my hair's driving me crazy. It'll be okay. Okay, so next up I have The Wonder by Emma Donoghue, and I did read this book in a day in the summer, and it was just really engaging and hard to put down. So this is the story of like a small Irish village that believes a miracle is taking place. And the miracle is that there's this little child who's like 11 years old, I think. Let's double check. Yeah, she's 11, named Anna, and she hasn't eaten and she's not dying. She hasn't eaten for a long time now. A kickball just hit my window. The priests in her town want it to be declared a miracle. So what they're doing is trying to prove that nothing shady is going on. So this English nurse named Lib is called in to share shifts with a nun to see whether or not this girl is eating. So the way they do the shifts, though, I think is really interesting. Instead of doing 12 hours on and 12 hours off, which is what you would assume you do, they do 8 hours on, 8 hours off. So while Lib is watching this little girl, Anna, she's also kind of being like super sleep deprived because she's going very long without sleep sometimes, because she'll have like a shift on, and then sometimes when she has her shift off, she's not sleeping at all during her shift off, and then she's got another shift on, so she's been up for 24 hours. It's very unsettling. That's the best way I could say this. It's not like a thriller. It's kind of like a psychological thriller, but like in a historical setting, because it takes place, I don't think they ever say like an exact year, but it's like 10 to 15 years after the potato famine, because there are people Lib's age in the town who survived the potato famine. Creepy and good. Netflix made a movie of it. I watched it. I liked the book better, but I thought it did a pretty good job at capturing the tone of the book. Next up, we have a book I don't have, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. This is one of my favorite books, and I did read it in a day when I read it in 2007, I think is when I read it. This is like an allegorical story of a journey, and a lot of people read it in school, and the people I know who've read it in school don't like it as much. So I'd say if you didn't read it in school, don't take what people who read it in school as like a good review, because I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I loved the ending. It's got so much of like a folktale feel. Like you just feel like you're reading an ancient myth come to life. Beautiful. If you like mythology retellings, definitely read this one. And then lastly, I have this little book, The Tao of Pooh. And I just picked this by Benjamin Hoff. I just picked it up kind of like on a whim because I read this a really long time ago. It's like really faded. Probably like around 2007, because I know I bought it at the bookstore that I used to work at, maybe like between 2005 and 2009. And I minored in philosophy in college, and I was feeling like I was really missing reading philosophy, and this book was big then. I'm trying to see when it came out. My pages are falling out at the beginning. This came out in 1982. I had no idea this came out in 1982. I thought it had come out like right when I read it. So basically, it's like the philosophy of life told from the point of view of Winnie the Pooh characters. So they talk about how like Pooh is like almost like an archetype, and so is Piglet, and so is Eeyore, and so is Owl and Rabbit. I don't remember if they talk about King and Rue because they're like later editions. But if you are someone who wishes they had read more philosophy or wanted to get back into philosophy, I recommend this. I also have The Tay of Piglet. That one, I read both of these in the summer, and I think, like, look at what happened to this. Did I read this at the pool? I don't think I did. But I definitely maybe spilled a glass of water on it because it's definitely got some weird markings on it up there. Still holding on to it, though. And those are all the books I have to recommend to you. You can always find a good book to read in a day. I haven't done one in a while. I gotta do one this summer, though, where I just immerse myself in reading. If you like to do this, read a whole book in one day, please in the comments put down your favorite book you've ever done this with. And if you want to let me know that you've made it this far without typing anything, you can put a stack of books emoji in the comments. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.